Christopher Columbus actually knew that America existed, and he was aware that Muslims lived there. So how did Muslims first discover America? Is there any proof? You will be amazed by the answer, and after you watch this video, you will agree that Muslims really were the first to have discovered America. Let's begin. Knowledge about America dates back quite far, so let's go back to the 1st century after the Hijrah. There was a person who lived in the time of Caliph Omar. His name was Imam al-Shabi. This scholar made an extraordinary claim. Abu Bakr al-Khalal recorded his words in a book. There are slaves of Allah who live further than Al-Andalus. They are at the same distance to Andalus as us. They are undoubtedly obedient to the Creator. The grounds are covered in rubies and diamonds, and their mountains are filled with gold and silver. They neither plant anything, nor do they work. They feed from trees that bear fruits and dress from trees with large leaves. If you know a bit about history, then you know that he was describing the first native people of America. And we all know that the American continent has an abundance of gold, silver, and various rich fruits. This scholar has said that they are as far from Andalusia as we are. Looking at the geographical location he gives, we see that the area beyond Andalusia is the Atlantic Ocean. Imam al-Shabi lived in Kufa. If you measure the distance of both Kufa and America to Andalusia, then you will see the shocking result. Just as Imam al-Shabi said, the distance between Andalusia and America is roughly the same. So how did he reach this knowledge? Unfortunately, no one knows. Now let's go back to the 3rd century of the Hijrah. Al-Masudi, who lived in the 900s, mentions an explorer named Al-Hashash in one of his books. He says that he crossed the Atlantic Ocean, reached land there, and returned in 889. He said that he had seen people living beyond the Atlantic Ocean. This was in the 6th century of the Hijrah. What you can see is the world map drawn in 1154. Muhammad al-Idrisi drew it on a rounded surface. This shows that Muslims at that time knew that the world was round. But this is not the only detail we need to focus on. When we look at the map carefully, we can see that the geographers of the time drew maps differently. North is underneath and south is on top. But when we turn the map around, we can see the fascinating detail. There is a land beyond the coast of Europe and Africa. Al-Idrisi called it the Huge Land. In one of his books, he notes that in Portugal, which was once a Muslim land, a couple of Muslim youths crossed the Atlantic Ocean, and some of them made their way back. He heard that they had found a new land, and more interestingly, that they had encountered Arabic-speaking people there. This shows that Muslim people were already living there. And I would like to remind you that we are talking about a time 300 years before Christopher Columbus. In his book, historian Shihab al-Omari mentions a fascinating incident. This incident involves Mansu Musa, Sultan of the Mali Empire and the wealthiest person who ever lived. In 1324, while on a pilgrimage to the Holy Kaaba, he stopped in Egypt and told this historian about his brother Abu Bakr II. Abu Bakr II was a very interesting person. He rejected his right to the crown and handed it to his brother in 1311 so that he could discover new lands and take Allah's religion to these places. Of course, crossing the Atlantic Ocean was not an easy task. So Abu Bakr II summoned expert marine engineers from all over the Arab world. He put the ships that these engineers built through numerous durability tests, and at last a ship worthy of the task was built. Then one morning, 200 ships carrying 2 years' supply of provisions, 200 years before Christopher Columbus set sail for America. And we're talking about Muslim African people here. And it's so interesting that Columbus himself has written that African people lived in America. He continues to note that the Indians knew how to melt gold and combine it with other metals, and that they did this using a method known as the African method. It is well known that the Mali Empire was famous for its gold and other treasures, so it was no coincidence that the Indians used the African method. As a matter of fact, the BBC has mentioned this topic on its website. And even today, there are still people who speak and write in the Mali Empire's language. In 1564, the French produced a map of Florida. If you look carefully, you can see that there are places named after cities in Morocco and Andalusia. This tells us that there were Muslims that had migrated and settled there. In a book written by the Harvard University professor Leo Weiner in 1920, it is stated that based on certain events and evidence, Christopher Columbus was certainly aware of a Muslim population living in America. Let's look at an entry from Columbus's diary dated 1493. These people's clothing resembles that of the Muslims of Granada. He also mentions that he saw a mosque in Cuba. These sentences clearly show us that Muslims were present. In the year 2000 in Spain, the Duchess of Medina Sidonia. During the palace's restoration, Duchess Luisa de Toledo found documents written in Arabic and dated back to the Andalusian period. These documents described America precisely and proved that Muslims were there before Columbus arrived. Her family, who came from the Andalusian elite, had preserved these documents for years. She was worried that the Spanish might destroy these documents, so she gathered them and published them in a book. In this book, titled Africa versus America, she portrays all the details that prove that Muslims were present before Columbus arrived. In fact, the BBC interviewed Luisa Isabel in 2001. Now let's look at the proof. Who really did discover America? Whose name should be recorded in the history books? And how can you prove such a discovery? In 1929, a map was found in Turkey which astonished thousands of people, including those at NASA. Some scientists question whether it was even produced by a human being. How could this be? Who is this Muslim? And what does he have to do with America? The answer is in the next video. See you soon.